following is based on fact, fiction, science, or otherwise. We present that which is researched and that which is believed to be accurate and true. Professor Truth, guests, and associates may not agree on all viewpoints expressed, implied, or misunderstood by the reader or listener from the content communicated in any format. The information presented is for educational and philosophical purposes only, based solely on the spiritual precepts of the King James Bible as elucidated by original language word studies and the anointing of the Holy Spirit of Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, Yahweh incarnate, Father God in the flesh. Isaiah 9:6.
So I don't know. I know that I am constantly offended by the ignorant bastards that live on this planet that I have to deal with all the time. And they're very dumb. And they're very dumb. Very dumb. Very dumb.
This is Professor Truth. I wanted to do an introduction before our Flat Earth for Dummies Part 2 with Pastor Eli and Pastor Steve, two Christian identity teachers that are second to none on our earth in these end times, our spherical earth, I might add. So, again, why are we doing the Flat Earth for Dummies series? Because this infection, Psy Op, that infects many, is being attributed primarily to Christians. And it is, as you will see, if you still have critical thinking capacity, it is really a ridiculous, foolish position. And being attributed to Christians, it then is by association attributed to the Holy Bible and therefore the God, Creator God of the Bible, Yahweh or Yeshua, Christ Jesus. So really this is an attack on Jesus the Christ. Recently, a radio host who I have done interviews with challenged the Alpha team, Pastor Steve, Pastor Eli, and myself, to a debate on the Flat Earth topic. We have declined, and I realize that the Flat Earth community will celebrate a victory, a shadow victory like all their arguments. The reason we had declined, or have declined, I wanted to document so that it's not misunderstood. First and foremost, what does God say? What does Yahweh say? Yahweh says, do not have divisions among you. Now, of course, the whole Bible is written to, for, and about true biblical Israel. So, amongst true biblical Israel, we are not to have any divisions among us. We are not to entertain contentious arguments and foolish babblings of man. We are not to, avoid foolish arguments, foolish Jewish fables, those types of things. If you argue with a fool, the world will see two fools arguing, right? Because you'll never convince somebody against their will. That's what these flat earth, I'm trying to be kind, flat earth people are. They are mind-controlled under a psychological operation, likely a spiritual virus of the fourth kind. They're blinded to just reality. It's like The Matrix, the movie. I mean, several of us have been up very high in high-altitude aircraft looking out the cockpit, and the earth is spherical. And if that's not enough, see, they don't go off. I mean, it's fair enough. They could say, well, I didn't see it. Okay, fine. But you'll find as we go along here that whatever they can't establish by a emotional, how do you think, how do you feel kind of approach, because they have no science to back up anything they're saying. No repeatable, measurable, unambiguous, agreed to experimental baseline setup. They have none of that. So if it doesn't appeal to their thinking and how they feel and their little group cult community, then they they attack basic science. You'll see that. They say things like gravity doesn't exist, stars don't exist. It's hard to argue with that. If somebody says you don't exist, how do you prove that you actually exist? So if I asked any of you, how can you prove that you exist? Well, you really can't. Although we know that you do in this domain. Continuing, the reason I and Alpha Team chose to refuse the debate was, and this is the big one, for true biblical Israel, Christian Israel, we are not to entertain the other races, the other seeds, the non-Adamic seed in any way. We're not to fellowship with them. We're not to entertain them in discussion or debate. And there's lots of good reasons for that. But their ways will cause us to jump into the mud with them, right? And the world will see us lowering ourselves, our royal priesthood status, to that of the heathen. And that's not what we're to do. Yahweh does not want us to do that. Their gods, little g, and beliefs will be a stain to truth. Because their gods, little g, obviously 90% of the world does not believe in Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. And you can't convince them otherwise. And even though we have evidence and proof that the scriptures are supernatural, that it doesn't convince them. This is the same kind of thing. It's a argument that you can't win because you can't convince these mind-controlled. I would say they're predestined to be damned. I don't care how much they teach you the text of the scriptures or esoteric text. I really don't care. They're destined to be damned because they love not the truth and they love not true biblical Israel. And they have no interest in knowing who true biblical Israel is. They're destined to be damned. No matter what you think, what they say, how nice they act. We're not to be unequally yoked. And this is a broad principle that not only applies to your marriage. You need to marry within your race and within the belief system of Christian identity if you're true biblical Israel. And it applies to the other races too. Blacks should marry blacks, Chinese should marry Chinese. This is basic. Be not unequally yoked. But it goes beyond marriage. We are not to be unequally yoked with the heathen, with the non-Adamic seed of this world. And they shouldn't be unequally yoked with us. It's two opposite ends of a magnet. It's two different type of oils. It will not mix. We are 12-stone royal priesthood, elect, and they are 9-stone, possibly, I believe so, angels incarnate from the rebellion, and that is supported by angelfall.com. But we're not the same. Angels are not the same as the royal priesthood. They are a different species. Okay? I did a show, Truth Talk number 5, if you want to really understand the different kinds of mankind. We are 12 stone, they are 9 stone. So, for all those reasons, this not so short introduction is the Alpha Team has declined to do a debate with the non-Adamic seed. For the reason we are commanded to not be unequally yoked and associate with such. We are commanded not to have divisions among us. We are commanded not to be divisive. And we are commanded to have unity within true biblical Israel. Because we are the light to the world, and not to entertain doctrines of demons, Jewish fables, or flat earth, which is in that category of doctrines of demons. Continuing, for the short time that I did look into their arguments, what I found was they don't really have any arguments. They have to change everything to align to this mind control mental program. For example, if you bring up gravity, and there's lots of proofs that there's scientific proofs that gravity is real. I ask any flat earth monkey, just walk off a big building and tell me gravity doesn't exist. Well, you won't be able to because you're going to die, okay? Because gravity will kill you. So they say gravity doesn't exist. And then when you bring up the northern and southern constellations, that they are different, they say, well, It's all a conspiracy, and stars don't exist. So first we have gravity doesn't exist. Now we have stars don't exist. Then you say, well, we have satellites that have been up there to see that. They go, no, satellites don't exist. So you see a pattern here, folks? And then they attack NASA. We have never been to the moon, and NASA is just all lies. Okay, so far we haven't heard a single scientific proof for their flat Earth theory. We just hear ad hominem conjecture about stars don't exist, gravity doesn't exist, satellites don't exist. It goes on. Whatever you say, they say it doesn't exist. How do you debate fools like that? Really? You can't, and we're not supposed to. Alpha Team will not. We will present the truth, the facts, and the spirit of Yahweh. And if you're called to have that spirit, you'll hear us. If you're not, you will. You can join the Flat Earth Society. It really exists. Remember, science is measurable and unambiguous, repeatable, and is set up with experiments that are agreed to as a baseline. So there's no ambiguity in what you're measuring, why you're measuring, how you're measuring it. And you'll find in all of these flat earth YouTubes, it's all emotional conjecture. There's no scientific method to establish a baseline. There's absolutely nothing. And any thinking person can shoot holes in everything that they present. It's not even hard. But you can't convince them because they're under a mind control. It's the 2 Thessalonians strong delusion. It's a flavor of that. Yahweh says, I will give them a strong delusion so they believe the lies. Father God gives them the lie and makes them believe these lies because he gives them what they want. But the problem is once you dig your hole and you dig it deeper, you can't get out of it, and it just gets deeper. I want to make also an observation that there's not a single flat earth person. I don't care if it's Josh, starts with a P, I'm not going to mention all full names, or other people, even some you may know out there, that there's not a single flat earth person who's a bloodlight Adamite. Now, they may look like they have Caucasian skin. Rob starts with an S. They may look like they're Christians, act like they're Christians, they even have some really good teachings. But guess what? They're not. They're not full bloodline, 12-stone biblical Israel. Because if they were, Yeshua, Christ Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice and follow me. He didn't say they needed to have a church vote on any issue. He didn't say that they had to debate it, think about it. No, Christian identity, the whole Bible is focused on Christian Israel. I have only come for the lost sheep of Israel, true biblical Israel, not a place, a race of bloodline Jacob Isaac, okay? So these Rob S. and Josh P. and others that you may think are Christians, well, they're not. And most of you are not. And most of you watching this are not. You're in name only, and then you align to these flat earth conspiracies. That's what it is. Because people, you claim to be a Christian, but you're not. But the world doesn't know that. Because you say, it's just like the usual suspects. They use the word J. Again, not filling the whole word. They use the word J. I'm a J, and then teach all you not Christians in word only, in name only. Oh, the J's are the chosen people. And you believe it. That's how, my gosh, if flat earth wasn't enough, you believe the dispensational Darby Scofield lies that the J's are the chosen people, and you never question, well, maybe there is a chosen people, but it's not them. Hey, what do you know? Okay, so all of you are Christian in name only if you're flat earth. You're damned. I hope you wake up. But Alpha Team will not entertain debates with the heathen because you don't have the ability to understand true biblical Israel and higher wisdom that only a 12-stone can understand. Not trying to be harsh. I'm not angry, as I've been accused of. No, I'm just Professor Truth. Teach to repent, understand, take heed. We teach the truth on Alpha Team. We are a light to the world, one of the lights to the world. But no 9 stone is intended to be a light to the world. I don't care if they teach esoteric text, have a lot of good radio shows. Sorry, they're not. They're leavening truth. They'll tell you things like Naamah was Noah's wife and she was a serpent seed. They'll tell you that. That's a lie, and you'll believe it because you don't do the research. These are insidious leavens of the Pharisees and lies. No, yeah, there was a Naamah in Cain's lineage, but that was a different Naamah from the Naamah that married Noah. And no 12-stone Christian identity Adamite will get confused there, but the 9 stones will. Okay. Last, I want to just say that what they do when I'll say there's no prominent scientist that adheres to flat Earth, they'll come up with names, Capernaum, Sir Isaac Newton. And when I looked into some of this, here's what I found. In all cases, they always twist and take out of context whatever Sir Isaac Newton, for example. I looked this one up from their Flat Earth Society. They claim he was a proponent of flat Earth. They claim. Sir Isaac Newton didn't claim that, and nobody else has, but they claim it, and they count on you that you won't look this up. But I did look it up. And what Sir Isaac Newton said, he said, as above, so below. Remember, Isaac Newton was the one with the apple dropped from the tree, and therefore he established gravity, which they say doesn't exist too. Isaac Newton said, as above, so below. Well, guess what? Our Bible says that too, and so do the Freemasons, and so do a lot of things. There's a principle of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. On earth as it is in heaven. As above, so below, right? There's a concept. So they take that concept that Isaac Newton did right, as above, so below. And they say, oh, he's a flat Earth. He has a heliocentric. He denies the heliocentric model, and that goes on because he mentioned the sun, the moon, and the Earth. But no, folks, there's nothing in what he wrote that is established. He never said he was flat Earth. He never said he was not a heliocentrist, which means, folks, that the sun is pretty much stable and the planets revolve around the sun. He didn't say he wasn't that. He just wrote about the sun, the moon, and the earth. These folks are insane. It's really a bad situation. It's like the Mandela issue. I believe it's a spiritual virus of the 4th kind. Quantum breach in their mind domain. I really believe the demons are given free will into people's minds in these end times that we're in. And this is a demonic virus. So that's the intro. Alpha Team will decline a debate with any flat Earth person, period, because there will be no flat Earth person that is true biblical Israel. None. Zero. Not a single flat Earth person will be aligned with what the Bible teaches, which is Christian Israel. And since none of them follow the Bible, none of them have the wisdom given by Yahweh to even know truth. This is Professor Truth, and now we will start Flat Earth, Episode 2, with Pastor Eli and Pastor Steve, true Christian identity, biblical Israel teachers for our end times. So be it.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Pastor Eli James here, along with Pastor Steve and Professor Truth. This is installment 2 of the Flat Earth Exposed, and we're going to talk about the illogical and scientific flaws of the various flat Earth theories that are out there. And it's really quite simple that flat Earth doesn't explain any of the natural phenomena that we are aware of here on this global spherical Earth, including the fact that the time zones extend all the way from the North Pole to the South Pole in one continuous line. It is 6:20 p.m. in the Chicago area. And this extends all the way down to South America, where it is daylight, where the spherical Earth is turning toward the east, and every city, every country in this time zone, northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, is in the same time zone. Okay? The flat Earth models cannot account for this because, according to the flat Earth models, the sun either rotates around the perimeter of a flat Earth, namely hovering above Antarctica, which they conceive of as a ring of ice around the flat Earth, or they have a similar sun scenario where the sun is revolving around. You'd have to call it a North Pole, but I don't know what kind of sense it makes for a North Pole in a flat Earth model. But nevertheless, the sun supposedly revolves around this circle. But you can't get absolute darkness this way because the sun is shining on the entire flat Earth from there's just a difference in angle. You don't have a completely dark Earth from their perspective. So there's so many flaws with this, and anybody who believes it, anybody who's been sucked into it, doesn't know much about science. It's really, because what's happened in our educational system, it doesn't teach science anymore. It teaches that there's no gender, there's no God. Everything is socialism and transgenderism. That's all that they teach in school anymore. So the kids that are coming out of school have no science, basically no science. Plus, this is a gigantic Psy Op done by the internationalists to delitterize the population of the planet, and they're mocking us with this nonsensical flat Earth ideology. Okay, so I think we can pick it up from where we left off last week.
Well,
okay.
I want to make one comment.
All right.
They cannot explain the magnetic effects. GPS systems, they can't explain that. They can't explain just a common compass that shows north, relative north. They can't explain that. That it works everywhere. Okay. There's so much that they leave out. This is a deliberate act to sow discord and deception.
Right.
And to get people so
occupied
with this nonsense that they will not focus on what Yahweh is doing in these end times. It takes their mind off of
important stuff.
Getting their life right with Yahweh and not winding up in the lake of fire. That's the object of this false, well, they've had false doctrine, now they have false science. Science and the Bible coincide. They don't like the Bible. They don't like true science.
They'll say they like the
Bible. They don't want anything that will break up their little cult, and that is what this is. It is another modern day cult.
Yeah.
This is a cult belief. And they get vicious if you disagree.
Yeah, very vicious. It's just like disagreeing with the Holocaust, right? You get the same kind of vicious response. Okay? So it's a religion. Flat Earthism is a religion.
Yes.
That if you don't believe it, you get attacked. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a cult, really, because at least religions are not mind-controlled zombies. These people are in a cult because they truly are under some kind of infection or supernatural spell, from what I can tell. And I just wanted to add one comment from the questions that came in from episode 1. I don't even understand their point. They make no rational sense. Also, these flat Earth people.
Yeah, that's very common.
I think it's in Joshua, but one comment said, "What about where the Earth stood still?" I don't even know their point, but maybe you guys can understand what they're trying to say.
Well, okay, that's actually a good question, because the document we were reading from says claim the Earth is motionless. Okay, but that was only temporary. The earth stood still. So how's
that
it?
was a miracle from Yahweh.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they could win a battle.
So if Shadowall taught that the earth is motionless, what does stood still mean? Okay.
Yahweh, with his infinite power, could stop the rotation of the earth for so many hours.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have daylight to fight this battle and destroy those enemies of Yahweh and Israel. That was a miracle,
right,
done by the Father. They don't like that because they can't explain it. So they come up with a pseudoscience. Well, the earth stood still. That means it wasn't moving.
Well, I mean, the earth stopped rotating.
Flat.
The sphere stopped rotating.
That's right.
That's what happened.
If he can create the entire universe,
he can make the earth stop rotating.
Word, let there be blah, 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 and it came into being just because he said it. You think he can't make this planet, instead of going around and around, it just goes,
Yeah, right.
Because he had a purpose for that. And then when it was done, started up again.
He would have had to, he could do anything he wants, obviously, but the momentum of a spinning Earth going about 1,300 miles per hour, slowing down, it would have had to have been a gradual slowdown, or all the oceans and everything would have sloshed everywhere.
Right, and they may have.
Yeah, if he didn't suspend the natural order.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
But he's in control of that. They want to downsize Yahweh. That's the whole point. They want to downsize the Father. If he can say to a woman, you're pregnant, you're going to have the son, and she's pregnant, why can't he say to the earth, stop?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
What's beyond the power of Yahweh? It asks you that in Scripture.
But actually, it's a good thing. Yeah, you brought that up, because I think the quick summary of our first show on this subject, is that the Bible is really not committal one way or the other. There's not enough statements in the Bible to say that the earth is a sphere or a flat disk. It just doesn't address enough of the cosmology of the planet to make a determination one way or the other. So I disagree with Shadowall entirely that the Bible suggests that the earth is flat, but nor does it prove that the earth is a sphere. And we just have to leave it at that. Okay, I think that's a fair assessment. We're not trying to make the Bible teach a sphere when it doesn't. Okay, we don't need to go there. We don't have to do that.
Yep.
Okay.
We need to concentrate on. We need to concentrate on the wrath that's coming.
Yeah, right.
And getting our lives right, so we will make it through that period as part of the remnant. And we'll let Yahweh take care of the rest of it. How about that?
Yeah.
I think he's got it in hand.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so let me begin here by, this is also part of the article we've been reading, and I'll make this article available online at Eurofolk Radio. And once we post, let's say, our first episode, I will post this article. But I still have a few changes. I have a little bit of editing to do and a few comments to make before I can publish this article. But here, let's continue here. This is the story of Eratosthenes, Eratosthenes, Eratosthenes of Cyrene. In the ancient world, the greatest scholars and scientists from Egypt, Greece, and all over the Mediterranean went to work at the Library of Alexandria. One of these scientists was the ancient Greek astronomer Eratosthenes of Cyrene. While living in Alexandria, Eratosthenes received some amazing correspondence from the city of Syene. Mm-hmm. I hope that's pronounced or spelled correctly.
That's right.
In southern Egypt. In particular, it said that on the summer solstice. Now, what's a solstice? The solstice is when it could be the northern or the southern, either the top or the bottom of the planet is pointing toward the sun. Okay? And that's when the north has its summer And the south has its winter. And then 6 months later, it's the exact opposite because the Earth is tilted 35 degrees. So that tilt is what is responsible for our seasons. It's very clear that that's what's responsible for our seasons. Now, there's no flat Earth model that accounts for the seasons or for the tilt of the Earth or for why, for example, there's 6 months of broad daylight on the North Pole and during our summer solstice, and 6 months of darkness at the South Pole during our summer solstice. They have no explanation for that. There simply is none. The most they can do is deny that it happens. But we're going to present a video of the summer solstice, December 25th annual baseball game that's played on the North Pole at midnight. Okay? Mm-hmm. They've been playing this midnight baseball game on the North Pole for decades, because there's 6 months of daylight at the North Pole during the solstice, and then as you go down toward the equator, the days get shorter and shorter. So it goes 6 months at the very top of the Earth, and then the days get shorter and shorter as you go to the equator.
Panthers are set to host mini games in Groudon Park this year. As a matter of fact, they're set to host 4 different opponents in 7-game series. However, all eyes are going to be on one event in particular, the annual Midnight Sun Game. This 113-year-old solstice tradition has stood the test of time, and this year, it's going to be even more spectacular.
This year, the Midnight Sun Game will feature as the main event an entire day's worth of baseball activities. The Play Ball initiative, which was created by Major League Baseball to help spread awareness and involvement for our national pastime, will be hosting 24 hours of play ball. This is the first time that 24 hours worth of baseball and softball events have ever been held in natural light.
One of the things that happens in Norway and other northern countries during our winter solstice is they have shorter days than during the summer or even during the equinox periods. And they get what's called, what do they call it? The blue flu? Not the blue flu. They actually have a word for the condition. They get a depression because they don't get enough sunlight in the winter months. Okay? They actually have a term for it in the northern climates. All right? And I've been to Winnipeg, which is very far north. And they have longer days in the summer than we do in Chicago, and they have longer nights in the winter than we do in Chicago. It's precisely because of the tipping of the Earth. Back to you guys.
That's like in Alaska, all the documentaries they've done in Alaska, that they can hunt almost 24 hours a day when it's the constant daylight.
Right.
So,
exactly.
I mean, it shows up all over the globe, and it has to be a globe, otherwise it would not have that effect.
That's right.
So,
there's no way to account for that on a flat disk. There's simply no way.
There's so many examples that we will go over, and we have gone over and will continue to. What I've noticed is that the flat Earth mindset, of course, before the show, we discussed how really there's some infiltrators in this movement that are have an agenda to defame the Bible and defame Yahweh, Christ.
Oh, they're the leaders of it, yes.
Yeah, so there's a nefarious agenda. But what I've found is if you explain, well, what about the northern constellations and the southern constellations, their response is, well, stars don't exist. Then if you say, well, what about satellite imagery? Satellites don't exist. So
right.
Whatever they can't explain, they say it doesn't exist. And it's really,
I'm
insane.
At fault because there's a great black dome over the flat Earth, and I took my push pin and I went up and I
popped it.
And then I held a cigarette lighter in back of it, and that's why they see the stars.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and one more.
Y'all got your hip boots on, brothers and sisters? Yeah.
Yeah, one more comment. You mentioned this earlier, Pastor Eli. If the model I've seen, one of 2 models they use, they have a source of light, let's call it a sun, going around a flat or a dome-like Earth. But the problem with that is the sun is a point source, and it's infinite. From a mathematical perspective, it's an infinite far away point source. It's not really close and directional. In other words, the light rays from the sun would illuminate, as you mentioned, the entire flat or flat dome or whatever you want to call it. There would never be darkness ever. If
at any point of a flat Earth. Never be darkness anywhere.
Right.
The distances aren't that great. If you have a sun going, let's say, around the perimeter of Antarctica, according to one model, okay, so it wouldn't even be less light at the furthest end of the disk because the sun would shine all over the place.
That is the great celestial flashlight.
There you go. There we go. And it doesn't, and plus, as I said, the entire longitudinal time zone from the North Pole to the South Pole, going through, for example, Chicago to Cusco, Peru, and further south, they're all in the same time zone. They all experience a similar type of daylight. And in 6 hours, then they all go into darkness from the North Pole to the South Pole. Okay, complete darkness, which you cannot get with either of these flat Earth models. Just cannot get it.
Their math and their models are always flawed. There's always flaws in their experiment and their setup and their baselines. Their whole scientific approach is really non-scientific.
It's a Psy Op. It's a Psy Op designed to create. So look, what's happening is that people are waking up to the Rothschild global banking syndicate. If they're not totally aware of the banking syndicate, they're aware that they're being lied to by mass media, by the Democratic Party, by the Republican Party, et cetera, okay? So instead of people investigating that, they created this sideshow called Flat Earth. That's all it is. It's a deliberate government psyop sideshow to get people's minds off of politics, which is where they don't want you to be.
The flat earthers, pardon me, gentlemen, the flat earthers are bored. They don't have a real life, and they have to invent something that they can get all fanatical about to occupy their time and to attract attention to themselves. They're usually lonely, unpopular people that do not have a great deal of personal strength. They are weak people. I hate to say that, but they are.
They're products of our
looking
educational
for
system.
something desperately to make themselves more important in the eyes of other people. Any attention is good attention. Add attention. They're getting the attention they need through this. It's a psyop.
All right, it is a psyop.
For people that are built that way. I've seen it with people joining groups. They cannot stand on their own. They have to be a part of something because they feel inferior and all these different feelings. It caters, and groups like this, there's a lot of these cults all over that cater to people that are looking for a hug.
Right.
That's what they're...
Group hug, guys. Group hug.
Group hug. That's what this is.
Right.
And I'm 72 years of age. I just turned 72. I got a good education. I was taught science in school. Then I went to college. More science. Provable stuff that can be shown, demonstrated with research backup. They can't do that.
No, they can't.
They just come off with this off-the-wall conjecture. That's all this is conjecture. It's not documented fact.
Conjecture and denials. That's all they have is conjecture and denials. They have no coherent theory that explains everything that the spherical, heliocentric model explains. They simply cannot explain anything.
It gets down to the basics of, look, I'm different. Pay attention to me. Look at me. That's all it is. I'm sorry. It's a group of weak people that are hungry for attention. They feel inadequate in a normal life, and they have to draw attention to themselves through this foolishness. Even though people laugh at them and think they're foolish, they're getting the attention that they desire. They feel a sense of worth through this.
They're smarter than all ancient scientists, Newton, Copernicus, as well as all modern scientists.
The people in CI that are real CI are standalone people. Basically, I have met very many that need a group hug. They're standalone people that'll stand up and say, when somebody is laying BS on them, they'll say, whoa, I got to call BS on that. That's wrong. And this is why it's wrong, and then they'll hammer them.
Yes.
These other people have to group up and group attack.
Yes. Well, here Eratosthenes is recalling an experience that he had in Alexandria, which he never had up in Greece. And for example, in Chicago at the spring equinox, the sun rises directly east and sets directly west. You can go down Madison Street, which is the center street that divides Chicago between north and south. And you can look east and watch the sun go directly overhead, and you turn around and watch the sun go directly behind you and set on the west end of Madison Street. Okay?
Well, in this, on page 7, you have the light pole, and you see the other light poles, and this light pole is straight up, and it's got 2 globular lights up at the top.
Right.
Well, it has no shadow of a light pole, but the 2 globes
are right beneath.
They have a shadow on the ground because the pole is straight up and the sun is straight over.
Right.
Straight over the head of the pole and shining down on it, and it casts no shadow.
Exactly.
And the 2 globes that are out to each side, they'll cast a shadow.
Yeah, because
they're not oblong shadows. They're perfectly round because the globes up at the top are perfectly round.
Yeah.
It's like you would shine a flashlight down on this pole directly with a narrow beam. There's no shadow because the pole itself occupies the area there would be a shadow.
Its own shadow footprint, as it were.
That's correct. There you go. That's simple physics.
Right.
You can demonstrate that through a formula.
Yeah. Now, as the sun rises, it will cast a shadow to the west, but when it's directly noon, direct above, no shadow. Period. No shadow.
And the shadow will shorten as the sun comes up above, and which reaches the zenith directly above the perfectly vertical object.
Right.
There will be no shadow down here because the actual body of that pole will occupy the space of the shadow.
That's correct. Correct.
Speaking of shadows, sundials work that way, but also tonight is a full lunar eclipse, which is another checkmate proof that the Earth is a sphere, because as the Earth passes in front of the moon and between the sun and the moon, a curved line will start out on one side of the moon, and it'll go to a straight up line, and then it'll reverse its curvature as it exits. And that could only happen from a sphere. A flat Earth or a flat dome would have different aspect angles based on the illumination and would not show up as a line. And that's happening tonight, everybody. You can go out and look at it.
Right. Well, for example, if the moon is low in the sky, why doesn't the eclipse have like a flat disk?
That's what I'm saying.
Across the moon. I'm just kind of illustrating what you just said, right?
When
there should be a point where there's a flat disk.
It's a big pizza pie.
That's a flat Earth.
No, it's a pizza.
Right. Okay, so what he's saying and what this photograph illustrates is that when the sun is directly overhead, there's no shadow of the pole. Now, consider the two models of flat earth theology that we've been given. One with the sun at the perimeter of the so-called South Pole. Well, you're going to have a shadow going the opposite of the sun as the sun goes around the earth. You will never have a top-down position ever at either of these two models. So this pole would have to cast a shadow 360 degrees the opposite of where the sun is at all times.
That's how a sundial works.
Simple. Yeah, that's how a sundial works. Okay? So neither model can actually give you this effect where the sun is shining directly down the pole and casts no shadow.
And a good sundial will be able to be rotated for the time of year for just a certain distance. You have to rotate it so the sun would hit directly over that at noon. You can set that sundial like setting a watch.
Exactly. That's what they used to do in the ancient world.
That is correct.
And they can actually mark out the hours of the day on the ground as the sun traverses overhead. Okay? So this was a science. This was a science long ago.
Like the sun steps on the porch of Solomon were a sundial.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
The steps of I can't think of the guy's name. It started with an A. I went blank. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And
one of the kings of Israel or kings of Judah.
They've been using that method for years.
Was it Ahab? No, it wasn't Ahab.
It's just as accurate today as it was back then.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So basically what Eratosthenes figured out was that at the equator, the sun and the shadows of the various sundials behave differently from somewhere in the northern temperate zones. Okay? Because the angle of the sun is different there. And so he figured this out on his own. Okay? Now let's continue. As regarding this observation, the sun would be directly overhead at this time, not a single degree to the north, south, east, or west, and if you had a completely vertical object, it would cast absolutely no shadow. And this photograph is a beautiful illustration of that principle because the two lights...
light poles, and it shows them, and it's so clear.
Right.
It's a clear photograph.
Right.
The World Trade Center.
Exactly. Now, but Eratosthenes knew that wasn't the case where he was in Alexandria. Sure, the sun came closer to being directly overhead at noon on the summer solstice in Alexandria than at any other time during the year, but vertical objects still cast shadows. And like any good scientist, Eratosthenes did the experiment. By measuring the length of the shadow cast by a vertical stick during the solstice noon, he could figure out what angle the sun made with the vertical direction in Alexandria. So basically what he did, he compared the shadow of the earth at Alexandria and other places, and he was able to calculate the diameter of the the angle of the circumference of the earth. And the answer he got was 1/50th of a circle, or 7.2 degrees. But at this time in Cyrene, the angle the sun was making with an identical vertical stick was 0 degrees. Okay, so Cyrene was 0 degrees, and Alexandria was different. What could be causing this? In perhaps a stroke of genius, Eratosthenes realized that the sun's rays could be all parallel and the earth could be curved, okay?
Yep. Infinite point source.
Imagine that, okay? So horizontal rays of the sun coming from one direction, okay, flooding the Earth on one side. Okay, that accounts for the different angles in the north, the different angles of shadows in the south, with very little angle at the equator.
I had a gnat. I'm sorry, I had to kill him.
The flat earthers would say that the sun isn't 93 million miles away. It's only a couple hundred miles up there. That's what they say.
Well, if it's closer, then the angles would be even worse.
Right. They don't think any of this through.
Yeah, they don't. They just make stuff up and don't consider the results of their false
This is cult thinking, not the result of scientific experimentation or calculated thought. They have no formal training. They're talking out of their hat.
But they know that NASA lies to them.
Oh, yeah. Everybody lies.
I agree with that.
And if you get up in an airplane, you can see the curvature of the Earth.
Oh, yes. And I've seen that many times, I'm sure.
And they can't explain that away.
Yeah, I've seen it myself, way high up.
Oh yeah. Me
out of the
too.
cockpit, not the side window. I've looked out. So has Eli.
Yeah, lucky you.
I'm just saying, there's no question here.
So I don't know. I know that I am constantly offended by the ignorant bastards that live on this planet that I have to deal with all the time. And they're very dumb. And they're very dumb. Very dumb. Very dumb.
Lion is so cool.
Yeah, it sure is. And so there's another illustration of how the sun's rays strike the Earth and how the angles, because as the Earth, say this is the equator, as the angle increases, if there's a sundial up here, it's going to cause a shadow. A sundial down here is going to cause a shadow. But if it's directly there, it's not going to cause a shadow. That's
all right.
About.
You've got high noon over the equator. The sun is shining straight down. That's the curvature of the Earth is closer to the sun at that point, and the temperature is rocking.
Right.
You're on the same latitude. I think latitude is north-south.
Right.
Right.
So it's the horizontal lines.
All right.
Go up north and south, yes.
You're here. You're to go way north or way south. If it's 110 degrees right here and the sun is directly overhead, well, it's its closest point depending on the season, but you go down here because it's cold up here, even with the sun out fully. They can't explain that. Yeah. Why is it 120 here?
And zero at the poles.
Way up. You know, if the sun is up here, but if the sun is going around like this,
right?
Wouldn't it be an even temperature all over the planet all the time?
Stop using logic, Pastor Steve. That's not allowed.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't the heat of the sun?
Yeah.
They'll say temperature doesn't exist.
If it was going like this.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a fixed position for both objects.
Okay.
You never get a further distance of the sun from that flat Earth, and it would be an even temperature.
Yeah.
Would be no temperature differential.
That's another thing they can't explain, why it's hotter at the equator, at all points of the equator, than at the poles. They simply have no answer for that.
Well, that's because they grow chili peppers down there. That makes it hot.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
They'll say temperature doesn't exist.
And they got those belly dancers.
Temperature doesn't exist. It's a fiction.
Yeah, that's what they'll say.
It's a lie of the government.
Yeah, it's just like gravity. It doesn't exist. Okay, so but what's going on then in these colder climes? Yeah, and in fact, we can say, just like with the shadows of the sundials, the temperature gradient decreases as you go to either pole.
That's correct, because you go a further distance from the heat source.
That's correct.
Down the globe.
Equator has the most direct sunlight. That's the cause of the hotter temperatures. It's just that simple. You lay down in the sun, okay? You can experiment this on your own, folks. Lay down on the sun when it's high noon and bake your back, right? Or you can go on a 45-degree angle, and you won't get as baked as you are directly, 90 degrees.
Right.
It's just simple, okay?
If you're laying with your feet up, your feet will get cooked and your head will stay cool.
That's right. Okay. They call that the Tootsie Roll.
Yeah,
Tootsie
I hear you.
Their head's already cooked.
Tootsie, goodbye. Tootsie, you'll fry.
My Tootsie's got burnt. Okay. So from this simple calculation, he was able to determine the circumference of the Earth. Now listen to this.
Yes.
He was able to measure the distance between the two cities. He was forced to rely on the reported distance between the two cities because he didn't have a tape measure. The most precise measurement of his day, travel by camel. So I can understand criticisms of his accuracy, but just wait till you find out how accurate he actually was. Nevertheless, his results were that the distance between Syene and Alexandria were 5,000 stadia. The question, of course, is how big is a stadium? Well, we've got Bears Stadium in downtown Chicago. We've got Michigan Stadium. No, that's a different stadium, sorry. The answer depends, of course, on whether Eratosthenes, a Greek living in Egypt, was using an Attic stadium, that is a Greek stadium, or an Egyptian stadium, something still debated among historians.
Like a cubit, you've got the standard cubit, and then you have the sacred cubit, different measurements.
Interestingly, the pyramid inch is the basis of the English inch. They're virtually identical, only a couple of hundredths of a degree off, okay? So an Attic stadium was used more commonly and is 185 meters in modern terms. Using this value, one gets a circumference of the Earth of 46,620 kilometers, a number that's only about 16% bigger than the actual value. However, an Egyptian stadium is 157.5 meters, and it's conceivable that's what Eratosthenes meant. In that case, we get a value of 39,375 kilometers, which is often less than 2% of the modern value of 40,041 kilometers, okay? And this is simply by calculating the angles of shadows. That's science, folks. None of these flat earthers does any science. They merely speculate, they lie, and they cheat.
Well,
that's
2 plus 2 equals 5 if it makes you feel good. We don't want to hurt your feelings.
Right.
For you, 2 plus 2 equals 5 because it makes you feel good.
U plus U equals 1. All right. So
that's how they're teaching these kids. Nothing is certain. It's variable according to how you feel.
Right. Regardless of the actual values, Eratosthenes went on to become the world's first geographer, inventing the concepts of latitude and longitude that we still use today, and constructed the first models and maps based on the spherical Earth. So this was not invented by NASA. Okay? This was around 3,000 years before NASA, okay? So it's not an invention of NASA. Although many things were lost during the subsequent millennium, neither the idea of a spherical Earth nor the rough knowledge of the Earth's circumference were one of them, okay? People retained this knowledge. So did, who were those sailors from Tyre, Pastor Steve?
Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones who started the flat Earth theory.
Well, the Phoenicians actually were Israelites that left Egypt early before the Exodus.
Right.
They were the seafarers. And they went all up through Europe and even crossed in their reed boats, crossed the Atlantic.
America, there's no doubt. Yeah.
Well, they found evidence of that.
Oh, yeah. Their inscriptions are all over the eastern seaboard.
Well, that's a government lie. Somebody went around with a chisel and was...
Right. So that's the Smithsonian Institute agrees with that. Okay, that's a lie. So pick your poison. Which group do you want to believe in? No, you don't believe either one of them. You check it out for yourself. That's what we're trying. That's the point we're making here. Now, it was the Phoenicians who invented the story that if you wander too far out into the Atlantic Ocean, you'll come to the end of the earth and your ship will spill into what? An abyss.
You'll go down and you'll land on the back of the great turtle.
There you go. Right? But they invented this.
Why? You know why they did that? So nobody would compete with them.
That's
on their
right.
expeditions.
Yeah. Just like
beyond here, dragons.
Yeah,
There's dragons out there.
And they did this to scare the hell out of competitors who might wander to Britain and take advantage of the tin that they were mining in Cornwall.
Absolutely. They didn't want anybody messing with their monopoly.
That's right.
Well, is it different today?
It's propaganda, right?
No.
Right? And it worked. That scared the hell out of every other sailing community. Whoa, we're going to fall off the edge of the earth. Well, Columbus didn't fall off the edge of the earth, did he? Yeah. How about Magellan? He sailed around the Cape of Good Hope, all the way down there at the southern tip of Africa, rather.
Leif Erikson.
And Leif Erikson. He made it all the way across Iceland to Greenland to America, right? So, and none of these people froze to death. None of them ever, they encountered Antarctica and they encountered the North Pole, which are frozen.
What about the Hebrew mariners that sailed all the way over, one up the Gulf of Mexico, right, and then up the Mississippi River
and the Arkansas River, which is named after.
And then they did all these inscriptions in cave mouths and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That are the Paleo Hebrew writing, the stick writing, not the right, covered Hebrew of today, modern Hebrew, but the Paleo Hebrew, and they were all over. They explored the whole continent over here.
Right. We have evidence in Illinois. There's caves that have the stick writing. Yeah. Archaeologists have identified the four-figure stick writing as being the name of Yahweh. They were mining copper and other metals in Michigan.
And the Vikings that landed up north all the way through Minnesota, all over into that whole area up there. They've got inscriptions up there.
Right.
Columbus didn't discover this continent. He only landed on one Caribbean island.
Right.
He never made it to the mainland.
That's right. He was put in prison for a great deal of time by the Jewish guys that he had.
That owned the ship owner.
Right.
That wanted to cheat him out of his money. Oh, he's such a deal I got for you.
Yeah, Queen Isabella knew what she was doing when she kicked him out. Okay. So let's continue here.
Well, Eli, the Arkansas River was named after what? You cut out on that.
The Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, there were the records that I studied suggest that there were duplicates of the ark made. So there's only one real ark, but they made duplicates. One of them is actually on Elephantine Island in Ethiopia, and one was probably transported to Arkansas by ship. Okay, these are probably not the real one. And there's one supposedly in Ireland, buried under Tara Hill. Okay.
Well, so, the original ark is not in this dimension anymore.
It may not be.
Because of its power. It will return when Messiah returns.
Yeah, very good.
And it will be placed in New Jerusalem.
Okay.
There's no other dimensions. That's all science fiction.
Right. Right. Okay, he continues. Although many things were lost during the subsequent millennium, neither the idea of the spherical Earth nor the rough knowledge of the Earth's circumference were one of them. So these ideas were kept alive by these mathematicians. They're really not scientists yet. They're still mathematicians. And there was what we call, what's the term again? Chemistry. It's related to chemistry. The
alchemist.
Alchemy, that's correct. Thank you. Alchemy. And so, but that incorporated making scientific measurements, okay? And that's what Newton did, scientific measurements. He calculated the rate of gravity by watching objects fall, okay? So whether it's a flat Earth or a spherical Earth, that science holds true. So it's not true that there's no such thing as gravity, because still apples will fall on your head. Whether it's a flat Earth or a spherical Earth doesn't matter. Gravity does exist, okay? Anyone can perform the same experiment today with two locations at the same longitude and with simultaneous measurements of shadow lengths. You too can measure the circumference of the Earth. Not bad, considering that the first direct photographic evidence of the Earth's curvature would not arrive until 1946. And because you have to have photography, you have to have airplanes that go high enough, and somebody have the motivation to photograph the circumference of the Earth. Okay, now let's get back to longitude and latitude. Okay, latitude divides the two northern and southern hemispheres into degrees. Okay, so at the equator it's 90 degrees. The next latitude would be, let's say, 80 degrees, then 70, then 60, 50. Well, the higher you go, the less land mass is incorporated into that latitude. Where you get up to the North Pole, there's very little land mass up there. Okay, that's your latitudinal division. Longitude.
It's a wedge shaped.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the longitude is perpendicular to the equator. And that is, what is it? How many degrees is it? Probably, is it 360 degrees? Probably 360 degrees. So, and this, as I was saying, as with time zones, longitude corresponds with time zones. So if it's 6 p.m. in Chicago, it's going to be 6 p.m. in South America. Okay, because there's a city, I think maybe Cusco is directly south of Chicago. I haven't checked it, but they would have exactly the same time. If they're directly south on the same longitude as Chicago, they would be experiencing the exact same time of day as the city of Chicago. Mm-hmm. So Chicago north, Cusco south, exact same time. Same thing in South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, Berlin. Exact same time. They're on the same longitudinal and same time zone. Okay? But in the springtime, in the wintertime, our wintertime, South Africa is experiencing summertime, and so is South America. Okay? Again, these are things that cannot be explained from a flat Earth perspective. Simply cannot be explained. Back to you.
Well, all I can say is that they're beyond insane, and I just have a hard. I don't even know really why we're doing this show, except we are trying to ensure that our Creator Yahweh is not defamed, defiled, denigrated by a flat Earth mindset that first makes Christians look like they're idiots, and then people associate Christians with the Bible and then with Yahweh. So we're doing these shows so that association with Christians with stupidity and imbecilic natures and mindsets is not attributed to all Christians.
Right.
The true Christian identity teachers like Pastor Eli and Pastor Steve are teaching you the truth. Now, I can't help all the Darby Scofield dispensational teachers, which are the majority in this lying system of institutionalized religion. You can put all those in the flames already. But for true teachers like CI teachers, you will hear the truth, including a spherical Earth, because CI teachers are educated, they do the work, they work hard, they're diligent, and they show themselves approved. Over to you,
Right.
Steve.
Yeah.
Well, it's Yahweh's order
Of arrangement.
of arrangement.
Right.
They have tried to substitute that in the Bible for God so loved the world. Well, it's Yahweh so loved his order of arrangement.
His order.
Plan for the redemption of Israel included him as Yeshua manifesting on this planet, allowing the life in the body he was occupying to be destroyed by those evil people, and then re-inhabiting that form and making it perfect again in 3 days, showing his glory, and then walking around and having everybody see him, and then having a whole group of people there when he went whoop.
What goes up must come down.
Yeah, and then they
Or what comes down
they
goes back up.
bribed the guards at the tomb to say his disciples stole him.
Mm-hmm.
They perpetuate that even today. Money talked back then.
Right.
Oh, you can't say he got up and walked out.
Right.
You got to say that his disciples stole
Yes.
him away, and they're perpetuating a lie, because if it's true and he really rose, we're doomed.
Right. Right.
Well, guess what, dudes? You're doomed.
Whether the earth is flat or spherical. Right.
Yep,
Okay.
a giant pepperoni is going to land on you.
Right.
Vengeance is mine, saith Yahweh.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
pepperoni is mine. Splat. So that'll take. This is flat Earth is ludicrous, is what it is.
Yeah.
It's just.
So I don't know. I know that I am constantly offended by the ignorant bastards that live on this planet that I have to deal with all the time. And they're very dumb. And they're very dumb. Very dumb. Very dumb.
Okay. And but Shadowald goes back into, because we discussed the word firmament in conjunction with our series of Genesis 1 through 9, I believe we took it all the way 1 through 9, the creation scenario through Noah's flood. And where we encountered the word firmament, we said, no, that's not really a good word. And that word firmament suggests what Shadowald calls a vault. Let me read what he has to say here.
Well, the actual word is dome.
Okay, dome, but that doesn't mean it's a solid dome. It just appears that way. Okay.
It's a globe around a globe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it
was called the
air.
rakia. It was called the rakia.
Rakia, yeah, and rakia does not mean firmament. Okay, rakia is it means to spread out. It's a verb, to spread out. It's an action, as in hammering brass or some soft metal to spread it out, to make it go further in a certain direction. Okay. The vault of heaven is a crucial concept, he says. The word firmament appears in the King James Version of the Old Testament 17 times, not in the Hebrew, but in the King James. In the Hebrew, Pastor Steve is correct. The word is rakia, which meant the visible vault of the sky. Okay, well, what does vault mean? It means the visible sky. Stop injecting words that don't belong, like vault. What is vault? A vault is something you keep your money in, right?
Well,
Okay.
it was called the dome because at that point in time, there was a lot of ice and everything.
Yeah.
Frozen above the globe.
Yes.
And when flood came, Yahweh shattered the rakia, and all that ice started to melt and come down, and that's where all that rain came from.
Right.
Was from the melting rakia above the planet.
Yes. Okay. Now, he agrees here that the word rakia comes from rika, meaning beaten out. Actually means to spread out. And in fact, the King James Strong's Concordance says it means space. A better translation would be space. In ancient times, brass objects were either cast in the form required or beaten into shape on an anvil. And when you beat them into shape on an anvil, you spread them out. A good craftsman could beat a lump of cast brass into a thin bowl. So you take a little piece of brass and you spread it out into a bowl, okay? The concept means to spread out. And that's what outer space is. It's spread out. Okay, and thus Elihu asks Job, can you beat out, that is Raka, the vault of the skies as he does, hard as a mirror of cast metal? And Yahweh asked a bunch of questions of Job. Can any human being do what I have done with the earth and the sky, etc.? Of course, and none of us can, and no scientist can either. Okay. So he continues, Elihu's question shows that the Hebrews considered the vault of heaven a solid physical object. That is a stretch, because the word rakia doesn't mean a solid physical object. It means beating out or beaten out, spread out. Such a large dome would be a tremendous feat of engineering. The Hebrews and supposedly Yahweh himself considered it exactly that, and this point is hammered home by 5 scriptures. Who by himself spread out the heavens?
That's Shemayim.
Mm-hmm. Heavens, and that's in the plural, by the way.
Which means the skies.
It's the skies, okay. So it's not a dome. It's not a vault. It doesn't suggest any such thing. The heavens tell out the glory of God. The vault of heaven reveals his handiwork. The heavens were thy handiwork. I with mine own hands, of course this is metaphorical language here, stretched out the heavens. It doesn't say how far. Could be to infinity. And caused all their hosts to shine. Who are the hosts, Pastor Steve?
Those are the planetary bodies and the stars.
Yes.
Okay.
And the living beings.
And
the angelic beings.
The host of heaven are the planetary bodies that they used to worship.
Mm-hmm.
Yahweh's host is his army of messengers.
Yeah, angels / messengers.
Well, they're
okay.
Some of them are nice. A lot of them are not nice.
Now here's where
those are the ones that are coming back. Get ready for that, sports fans.
Yeah, right. Okay, Isaiah 48:13, which in my opinion is translated correctly. It says this: "With my right hand I formed
the symbol of power.
The expanse,
right hand.
Right? The expanse of the sky." There's no limit. It doesn't give us a limit, okay? And if you use the word vault, that suggests a limit, which there is no limit. And even the word dome suggests a limit. But Pastor Steve explained that's about the
dome was destroyed.
Right. And then the blue sky appeared. They never saw a blue sky before that.
And then the lifespans shortened because the harmful rays of Sol could get through, where they were filtered and reflected back, the harmful worms. It was almost like a steam room, because it was just all steam. The heat would get through. Everything was steamy. It didn't have to rain. They didn't have to water the crops. Everything grew fantastically. And then when the rakia was broken and fell, all of the rays of the sun shine through, and that at that point, he said, I will limit their lifespan to so many years, 125 years. That's what it says in scriptures.
Okay. And as part of the article, Shadowald has another image of a flat earth. Of course, this is all speculative, with a dome of sky. no explanation of what limits the dome of the sky to this sphere. Although what Pastor Steve is talking about is very logical, that it would pertain to a spherical Earth or to a flat Earth, that there was a quote-unquote dome of ice crystals, which caused the Earth to be a basic greenhouse, the greenhouse effect, where you did not have these extremes of temperature like we do today. Because the cloud cover is gone, the ice sheet cover is gone, that collapsed into rain, and what we have today is a blue sky with clouds. They did not have that before
and
this
chemtrails.
collapsed. Yes, and chemtrails, right. So this speculative drawing here, which is very similar to one of the models that we are going to present here, showing a dome of sky with some sort of limit, but the Hebrew word rakia does not suggest a limit. It simply means to beat out. It means expanse. The very word expanse does not suggest a limit. Okay? That's something that they are imputing to the word. Okay? Word games and mind games.
Well, they love to twist.
Right.
It's a necessity.
Come on, baby.
If the truth does not suit them, they will twist the meanings to suit.
Right.
They're going to get their viewpoint as right, no matter what they have to do and how many lies they have to tell.
All right.
To so-called prove their viewpoint.
Right. We're just about out of time, but he tries to reference the book of Enoch with regard to this vault concept, and it's wrong. We'll get to this next week. The fact is that what Enoch is describing in chapter 33 and talking about the gates of the sky, etc., he's looking at a device like Stonehenge, okay, which tracks both the sun and the moon as they rise and set according to the seasons, which of course are caused by the tilt of the spherical Earth. That's what Enoch is telling us about in these chapters, and so we'll get into that next week. Okay, it's there's too much. It's without actually looking at these so-called gates, and that's the translation. Somebody translated the word gate, and we're not sure what the Hebrew word is, because the book of Enoch, its Hebrew origin, it obviously was written in Hebrew, but it hasn't survived in Hebrew. It has only survived in the Ethiopic. Okay, so we don't have the original word that is translated as gate. But what he's actually looking at is the gap between the stones, such as Stonehenge, where everybody knows now that Stonehenge is a solar calendar. That's what it is. And it tells you where the sun sets on the summer solstice. It shows you where it rises and sets at the equinoxes, and it shows you where it rises and sets at the winter solstice.
It was perfect at one time before they destroyed it. Mm-hmm. They have destroyed all those stones that were in the circle, and they had the center thing, and the shadows would give the accurate calendar and sequence.
That is correct.
So they destroyed it.
That's right. And so there's actually some of these Stonehenge type constructs are still around in South America. And of course, their construction would be different. Their construction would be reflecting the southern hemisphere and so they would be the exact opposite of Stonehenge in the northern hemisphere, and that's what we find. Okay, so if the Earth is flat, why do these henges reflect the northern and southern hemispheres of a spherical body? Why? Of course, they have never thought this out. They have never gone this far with their ideas.
This whole movement is a knee-jerk reaction.
It's a Psy Op.
All it is.
It's a government Psy Op to distract people away from real news. That's what it's all about.
And to distract them and get them away from Yahweh to make them doubt what's in the Scripture.
That too.
That's the main purpose.
Yes. Now, interestingly, he quotes Job 26:7 that we quoted about the earth hanging upon nothing. And he says, he stretched out the north over the empty place. Empty. Empty. You can substitute space for place. Right? The empty. It's emptiness out there. That is accurate. That is accurate.
Right.
It's
That's
empty.
why the atmosphere gets thinner and thinner and
There you
thinner
go.
the higher you go.
Whether
and
it's
then you're out in no atmosphere and you need to have a suit on, and there's no heat out there because there's no atmosphere to retain the heat.
Now, interestingly, he quotes First Enoch here, 21 verses 1. And I came to an empty place, and I saw there neither a heaven above, nor an earth below, but a chaotic and terrible place. Okay? So he was shown different, we've used the word before, parallel universes. He was shown different
Dimensions.
Dimensions. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was shown different dimensions. And you can't describe the fourth dimension with only 3 dimensions. You can't describe the fifth dimension with only 4 dimensions. But you can describe the fourth dimension with 5 dimensions in mind. And that's what Enoch did. He traveled higher in dimensionality and looked, quote unquote, down, or he looked through what we call 4-dimensional space-time.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you cross dimensions like that, you get 1,000 times more information. Just like if you're an eagle, if you're riding on a train and you look left and right, back and forth. But if you get the eagle's eye view, you can see that there's a bridge out a mile down the track, right? You can't see that from the flat Earth perspective. Okay? So it's way more complicated than Shadowald wants to suggest. But this just shows you can have two people can have the same set of facts and come to completely opposite conclusions as to what those facts mean.
Not unless they're scientists, because the scientists will use common methods,
Right.
that are unambiguous and measurable.
Yeah, right. And for example, a laser. A laser shoots an almost perfectly straight line. It's the straightest line that you can shoot of any kind of light or what have you. Certainly there's no tape measure that can stretch out that far. Okay? So, and this clearly shows there's a tangent at the sphere of the Earth, and it corresponds to what Eratosthenes found with his shadow studies, proving him correct. Okay? And there's other evidence as well, including the fact that when a ship sails over the horizon, the bottom end of the ship disappears first, leaving the sails to disappear last. Right? It's because it's going according to the curvature of the Earth.
Well, even a laser will bend.
Yes, it will bend a little bit. Yes,
Depending on what it is passing through.
Yeah.
And it shows that gravitational effects do affect that beam of light, because that beam of light shows molecules. It illuminates molecules, and those molecules themselves are affected by the gravitational pull.
That's
so
right.
It will bend it
Right.
in a curve.
Yeah, and that brings up another point. So why does a setting sun turn red? Okay.
Pollution in the atmosphere.
Well, that too, right? But the red spectrum of
Redshift.
that's the red shift. It's the red is the slowest of the entire white light spectrum. The ultraviolet being the fastest, and
Well, I don't know if I would use slow or fast, because it's all going at the same speed. I think you mean wavelength.
Yeah, wavelength. Right. Well, I'm talking about the wavelength of the red.
Right.
Is bigger. Okay, than the ultraviolet. And so that is what shows up when the sun sets. You lose the other colors, and the last color
is visible longer because of its wavelength.
Yes, it hugs the ground better. Put it that way.
Right.
It's the effect that Pastor Steve was talking about. Light does bend.
And
gravity bends it.
The other wavelengths at that grazing angle are absorbed and scattered, whereas that, because it's a longer wavelength, is not absorbed and scattered.
Yeah, and it hugs the ground. Okay, so that's why it's perceived longer than the other colors of the spectrum. Okay, again, this is physics that no flat Earth theory ever discusses physics. I've yet to see a flat Earth video where I know they attempt to refute the curvature of the Earth, the degrees. They attempt to refute it, but they don't do any comparable math to what science has showed is the fact, right? And then they blame it also on mist. Because as the ship sails away, the air gets mistier and mistier, because of the haze on the water. But, why should a mist cause the bottom of the ship to disappear sooner than the top of the ship? Okay, they don't explain that.
Well, that the ship sails into the area where the dragons are, and the dragons are pulling it down.
It falls off the edge of the earth, right? The Phoenicians told.
I shouldn't mock them like that, but I can't help it.
Yes,
I can't either. I can't stand them.
There's no science behind it. It's nothing but pure speculation.
There's no rationality to their arguments.
Mm-hmm.
They can't document anything.
No.
They can't use established science because they've never learned it.
Mm-hmm.
They're going by feelings and by what they want to be, again, so they can get attention. It's an attention-getting thing. Oh, I believe in a flat Earth. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me more. I've got somebody's attention. Oh, goody.
Right. Well, the two models we've been talking about, both show the sun going around a flat disk at various different positions. Okay, the most extreme is the sun goes around the Earth at the Antarctic Circle. Okay, you're not going to get total darkness from that model. You're not going to get total darkness from the other model.
Ever.
Well, if the sun was closest to the Earth there and going around the Antarctic Circle, why doesn't it melt the ice?
That's a good question.
Well, here's another one. We have GoPro cameras and we have airplanes. And if there's an ice ridge around the outer edge, we have airplanes. They would have explored it, hundreds of them.
They would have seen it.
Yeah. We have GoPro cameras. Somebody would have sent one on a little drone. Yeah. How come none of that exists?
Yeah. No, we're going to get into it. We're going to provide physical evidence that that whole theory is false. There was a guy who flew around the world from east to west. He never encountered this Antarctic Circle that they claim exists.
Several people have.
Yeah. Well, this was a private guy just taking planes from one city to another on a whim around the world. And he never ran into this Arctic Circle or Antarctic Circle of ice. He started somewhere near Chicago, somewhere in America, and then flew around the world and came back. He never encountered this circle of ice from east to west. Okay? So then there's all kinds of evidence, from airplanes, clearly showing, and you can't explain away all of the circular evidence based on the portholes you're looking out of, okay? Because you can actually get, from a porthole, you can get the Earth curving up instead of down.
Well, also, you've got the crust of the Earth. All of it was molten at one time. It shrunk as it cooled. When this became solid, the core, which was still molten, cooled on its own. It has pulled away and shrunk even more. And there are vast underground areas that are open caverns.
Vast.
Vast, very vast.
And they have not been explored. Anybody that gets down in there
Okay,
either dies or comes out real quick and doesn't talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, Admiral Byrd talked about it, and that's another reason for this flat Earth disinfo. I'm glad you brought that up, Pastor Steve, because they don't want you to know what's going on in Neuschwabenland down in Antarctica, where they have discovered these vast caverns, and they're so big you can fly an airplane in and out of them.
And there's stuff down there they don't want you to know about.
Yeah, the Nazis were using those places as bases during World War II. Okay, that's why Admiral Byrd went down there. He was wondering, why are the Nazis going down there? And he describes an encounter he had with
Nordics.
Nordics, right? Nordics. But they had airplanes that were so fast he couldn't believe it. And they had weapons that would blow his airplanes out of the sky.
And tractor beams that grabbed his plane and pulled it down.
Okay, right. And so he hightailed it out of there when he encountered the weapons that they had. It's all described in his report. This report has been suppressed. This is another reason why they're creating this flat Earth digression. It's all digression.
It's like the reports of still existent Nephilim in vast underground areas out west.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
And they found skeletons of those that have perished, but there's live ones. If they come to the surface and get spotted, they got to scoot back down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Colonel SC stated that he and his men would actually escort 75-foot red-headed giants underground at machine gun point. So, as well as seeing Nephilim under there in these blue encapsulated containers, and they were in a form of stasis. But there was a red line on the ground, a piece of tape that you could not cross because they may have been in stasis, the Nephilim, in these blue ice-looking type of things, but their mental capacities, if you cross that line, you would actually be killed because they could entangle with your brain and mind and destroy your mind.
Right. Okay. And so they still have mental power even though they're encapsulated. Well, it confirms the Bible's narrative that these fallen ones are being held under the earth until the judgment day.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I will repeat this. What we don't know far outweighs what we do know.
Yeah, you're full of humor. Such humility, Pastor Steve.
Well, we're going to tell you what we do know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, we're doing that weekly.
Yes. Okay, this has been fun. We don't really mean to make fun of the flat earthers because we know some of them have come out of the public schools where they have been deliberately dumbed down and taught no science and fairy tales that are called LGBT socialism, and that's all they've learned in school. So we have to understand that they have been dumbed down, unbelievably dumbed down. People who come out of the public schools are a mess, an absolute mess. Okay? All right, so folks, thanks for listening. Let me say a prayer. Because we here at Eurofolk Radio and on these videos, we are here to explain the truth of both the scriptures and science. That's what we've been doing all along in our studies on Genesis, that there is no real disagreement between the scriptures and science. It's the two sides have manufactured this false dichotomy between bad science and bad religion, and you have only been allowed to choose one or the other, where the truth lies in between. There's good science and good religion, and those two agree with each other, and that's where Christian identity succeeds, where other religions fail. Thank you all for listening. Praise Yahweh. We'll see you next time.
So be it.
Praise Yahweh.
So I don't know. I know that I am constantly offended by the ignorant bastards that live on this planet that I have to deal with all the time. And they're very dumb. And they're very dumb. Very dumb.